Hello and welcome to the On the Whistle podcast. This is your Rugby Afrique edition. And joining me to break it all down is Caleb Mutombwa. Caleb, how are you doing, brother? All good your side?
Yeah, I'm okay. I don't want to be coming with an agenda, but I think there's some things we need to sort out a little bit on today's review of the weekend that was of rugby. Yeah, there's things that need to be talked about a little bit.
Well, I mean, and listen, what a busy weekend of rugby. We had the Women's World Cup to come to its conclusion here in the United Kingdom. England winning that tournament 33-13 at Twickenham in front of 80,000 people. And then in the Rugby Championship, we had the Bledisloe being retained by the All Blacks as they beat the Wallabies in Eden Park as that streak continues. What are we, 52 plus now? And then in Durban, I just got to say this. I got to say this. People hate on Durban. They're like, oh no, we lost to Argentina there. Oh no, we shipped a big score to the All Blacks there. And I'm like, yeah, but I remember when the Springboks came down from 20 plus points in the late 90s to beat the All Blacks there. I saw South Africa win the Rugby Championship there in 2004 after the Annus Horribilis in 2003 when they were absolute terrible and they had Cam Staldrat and they had the Geogate and all those awful things. I was there in Durban for that. And I even see the Lions won there. And then we did something so special, but we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that game. It was a bit bizarre at certain points. I have my thoughts on referees. Caleb will defend him to the hilt, but we'll get to that later. And of
Hands off the
course,
referees. Hands off the referees.
I like Holly Davidson. I think she's got something about her. I think she's a fantastic ref, but I'm not sure about the others. And we'll also throw in some URC. The Storm is looking good. My Sharks, not so good. That's why maybe I'm not wearing the hat. But Caleb, let's start off with the Women's Rugby World Cup final. England winning the title. It was a phenomenal crowd at Twickenham who pitched up for this. The second biggest crowd that's ever watched a World Cup final. All the noises are coming out that this was a seminal tournament for women's rugby. How did you see it now that we're able to reflect on it?
Yeah, I think we need to look at it more as the beginning of what women's rugby needs to shape itself to become and not necessarily replicate what's happened in the men when the men turned professional post 1995. I think we need that button to carry over. Let's see the crowds in the Six Nations coming up in April. Let's see the crowds in the PWR. But you can't run away from the inspiration that these women have done. You know, they've lost two finals in a row, 2017 and 2022, to the same opponents, and they've finally summited Everest. It's good justice because the RFU have invested in women's rugby as a whole. People will say, well, it's only England who've been invested in. I don't know, because about 8 of those Canadian players who played in the final play in the PWR, and they've harnessed their skills primarily by playing the PWR because it's a good competition. So it was fantastic to see Zoe Allcroft lift that trophy. A 5th World Cup for people like Emily Scarrett, 2nd World Cup medal, Emily Scarrett, Natasha Hunt, Alex Matthews, and Manly Parker, as well as Sarah Hunter. Heads off to her as defense coach, who spoke at that final at Eden Park after her team had just lost in a
Mm,
final they were supposed to win, and did some tough post-match engagements and is there as defense coach. And that's how they beat Canada. Canada did not get the time and space that they got against New Zealand. That was amazing to watch. And if you know these women, some of the stories around Meg Jones, who's the vice captain who lost both her parents in the space of 6 months and doing well in this final. Natasha Hunt, who was dropped by Simon Middleton 3 years ago and did not go to New Zealand, has been a pivotal player in this particular campaign. It's just a fantastic story. The crowds were packed in, the t-shirts they were wearing for the girls. And I'm glad to know that Zoe Allcroft only went to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning, Sunday, 6:30, after having stayed away from any alcoholic beverage for 13 months. She said she had decided not to drink as a lead up to wanting to win this World Cup, and she still managed to outlast everybody. So, just a bit of a side note, the party at Battersea Power Station, epic. Well done to the Red Roses. Hardly deserved. Ellie Kildan, world class.
No, and look, I think it's a phenomenal result for the country. It's a phenomenal result for women's rugby, right? I know that I have a renewed interest in Bok women's rugby. On here on Rugby Afrique, we're very much focused on our African teams. So it was fantastic to see Sways de Brain and that team with so many players like Hele and Roos and Janse van Rensburg. So many wonderful players who maybe aren't household names, but now have more exposure in our psyche as South Africans. When you look at it from that perspective and we hone in on a team like South Africa, I mean, uh, this is a good thing, right? This tournament maybe helped to lift their popularity and their image in many people's eyes.
Yeah, and I think the idea that they shouldn't be playing rugby and being supported is gone away. And I
Mm,
think kudos must go to SA Rugby for taking it seriously and appointing a serious coach. You know, the moment
sure, in space.
Swayze de Brain was appointed there, it was showing everybody that they are there to take things to a serious level with lean contour, and I think that helps. I
Yes.
think shout out to Milutsindi Soboy. She has retired and she's announced her retirement from all things women's rugby, and I think she certainly deserves so as a good servant of the game. Some of the friendships she's built within that team, your Libby Janse van Reinsberg, your Nadine Ruiz's, your Babalo Lachas, it's been
Yes.
brilliant. The Women's World Cup has done a lot. It's now for other countries to come to the party. You know, we want a strong Australia. We want a strong Samoa. We want a Fijiana is quite strong. You know, New Zealand should stop this idea of backing down for 3 4 years and showing up at the World Cup. You'll see that they've won 6 World Cups,
Mm,
a lot, but Opiki is just 8 games. You know, it needs to be more. They need to get the players having more game time, and it's starting to show now that there's a point where natural ability doesn't count and systems start to count. That's where teams like England have proven that they can take on. That's why I thought Canada did not have a chance because even if they could stand with the 15, the 23 of England on its own, I think the second 15 England can put on that field will probably beat most countries and probably lose a final close to a Canada or a New Zealand. That's what systems do.
sure. Well, listen, that's a phenomenal way to start the show and highlight what happened at the Women's Rugby World Cup. I want to move us quickly along to the Rugby Championship. It was some phenomenal rugby at the weekend. Never too late to reflect on the results. We had New Zealand retaining the Bledisloe Cup after they beat Australia 33-24. And in Durban, South Africa winning 67-30 in a game that has really thrust them into pole position on the table with 15 points and looking good like they could win the title this weekend. No, not in Cape Town, not in Joburg, not in Port Elizabeth, definitely not in Durban, in London, which will be phenomenal. Caleb, let's start with the Boks because that was quite some result. I remember at the start of the tournament when we were previewing it, I'm not sure if you remember that Courtney and I had a discussion where we spoke about the fly halves and our concerns that if Polly wasn't there, who was going to do the job? I remember at the time him and I both didn't have faith in Marnie. Marnie has gone to show that we know nothing about rugby with the phenomenal tournament he's had post Australia. And then I'd said I love Sacha, and I then give Sacha a chance he could do something. Courtney was a little bit more worried. He felt Sacha was a bit more of a wild card. But 37 points, individual performance of wonderful brilliance. I mean, for me, that's the natural starting point. You might feel it somewhere else. What was your assessment of the game in Durban?
A weird game. In some aspects, the Springboks proved too powerful, and Argentina, like the good team they are inconsistent not only from game to game, but they go in and come out of matches, right?
In
And
Caleb's words, they can't win two in a row.
they can't win 2 in a row, but they also go in and come out of matches. But the reason why I think we're having this chat, the Springboks are fantastic. They're building a good squad. We heard from Rassi afterwards what his plans are, getting all the different combinations playing together all the time and having many variations. Brilliant. But I just want to make a call to the South African fans out there and say, Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu is not yet and is not the second coming of Dan Carter. Point number one. I'm happy to expand. Number two, if Handre Pollard is not fit in 2027, the Springboks will not win a third Rugby World Cup in a row. If he's not in the matchday 23 of those 3 knockout games, the Springboks will not win a third Rugby World Cup in a row. And I know there's a lot to dissect there. I don't know if you want me to get into that.
No, well, we're going to get into it because John Kerwin on the Rivals podcast told Victor Matfield that he thinks that Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu looks like a Dan Carter in terms of the all-round game, in terms of how he can play. Who are you to disagree with Sir John Kerwin, Caleb?
Look, I'd like to quote a very smart woman. I wish she was alive. She goes by the name of my mother. She said to me when I left for university, she says, life will take you into different aspects, and at some point you start to look for a life partner. And I want you to remember that if you're ever undecided, or if you're wondering yourself if you are a good partner for somebody else, pick somebody who, and you also need to be this person, so the onus was also on me, to do the boring things well, consistently, not most, but all the time when you can.
Mm-hmm.
We've all had exciting things in life, right? Lovely. You can take a kind of energy drink that gives you wings. I'm not going to give them free advertising. You know who I'm talking about. Whilst you're driving long road on the motorway, I'll bring this analogy back. It will last you for 30 minutes and then you'll start to feel drowsy. Right. Sacha probably has got a higher ceiling than any rugby player we've had in South Africa. Don't get me disputed. Skill set wise, talent wise, could have played football for Bafana Bafana, I understand. Could have also taken basketball seriously. He's not a short lad, he's big. But here's the things. You will not win a World Cup running the ball from your 22. You probably won't get that time and space against the All Blacks, France, or Ireland. Against an Argentine side that gets in and out of games, yes, number one. Number two, you know what Handre Pollard is also? He's a boring fly-off who tackles. Sacha loves to do the physical stuff, but he's not as physical as he thinks he is. We've seen him go in and out of test matches because of fitness. He only has 11 caps. Everybody calm down. Availability is the greatest ability. Let's start there, right? If you look at the history of Rugby World Cup fly halves, let's go for it. 95? Joel Stransky. Can't remember who was 87.
Nick Fox, if I'm correct.
Nick Fox, or I can't remember how he played, but we know Joel Stransky.
Kicking 10.
Boring Maritzburg fly half, right?
Michael Liner, 91.
Michael Liner, not the running kind, was he?
No.
Exactly.
Kicking 10.
2003, a guy called Johnny Wilkinson, famous for his drop goal. Yep. What was Johnny Wilkinson famous for? Process. 2007, another boring Butch James dude. Okay? The All Blacks, when they were all conquering, one of the facts that people don't like to talk about, yes, they played beautiful rugby, but they kicked more than most teams in the world. Ben Smith was at the back there, famous for his high bomb defusal and tactical kicking. Right? Who was fly half in 2011? They all got injured. And who came on?
Stephen Donald.
Stephen Donald, famous for kicking. Let's move on. Dan Carter, one of the most all-rounded kicking games. The masterclass he showed at Twickenham that day, kicking centric. Let's not get started on Handre Pollard. What I'm simply saying is, love all the cool and lovely things that you do, but you can't party for 7 nights in a row. At one point, you got to go home and cook some food and do the laundry. Sacha, brilliant player, generational talent, love him to bits, perfect for the narrative, head boy mentality. He's not the second coming of Dan Carter. Pipe down, everybody. Let's talk when he's played 40 tests for the Springboks, and he is one of the first 3 names on the team sheet.
All right, let me come back at you, kid. Let me come back at you right now, kid. Okay. Firstly, I think Sacha is more Johnny Wilkinson than he is Dan Carter. And
Really?
I say that because I would take prime Johnny Wilkinson over prime Dan Carter any day.
Why?
twice on Sundays.
Because you like to win.
Because I
Yes,
like to win.
exactly.
Johnny was in his prime, the perfect 10. He could
Yes.
kick and keep you moving going forward. He could run the ball and he defended ferociously. Now, that body couldn't take that physicality, right? And we saw that. He was a star that burned bright on an international stage. He had a lot of fantastic success between like 18 to like what, 22. And then it pretty much didn't happen internationally.
It was that 14-15 with the Toulon Galacticos, yeah?
Yes, at club level, he went and did that, but he never had, I would say, the same longevity as a Dan Carter did with the All
Johnny played
Blacks.
90 tests. He was 24 when he won the World Cup. I need you to look back at 2011 when England were in absolute shambles and he single-handedly was dragging that team.
Yeah, yeah. No, listen, I would take that, and you could make the same story about the same case about that old sort of ragged tooth pack that was like the Delalios coming off the bench and like
Yes, the
fighting for their lives,
2007
you
Laurent de
know,
Bournemouth.
right?
The Brian Ashton team, was it?
Yes, and let's also be honest. That England team should never have made a Rugby World Cup final, right? The All Blacks stuffed it. They got some bad decisions in the quarterfinal. Yes, we loved it that France won, and then France did what France did. They choked it home to England. Anyway, point
Yeah.
is, I would say that Sacha reminds me of more prime Johnny Wilkinson. I think he's great going forward. I think he loves the physicality. I think where he needs to get smarter is the decision making. And Caleb, let's just be very honest. A World Cup is won in exactly the way you said it is, and that's where Handre has his
Yes.
strengths. There's no one who's going to deny that. And look, we'll always go through this. When they needed the match-winning kick against France, when they needed the problem-solving against England, Polly showed what he can do.
Yeah, when Polly was when Pollard was on the
But
field when they needed to win a British and Irish
but
Lions test,
but
they brought him on a stain.
but let us South Africans let us be excited now that we've got a ball at 10, and then we've got the man who's got ice in his veins, and Polly's the goat when it's BMT and it's pressure. I don't think I've seen any South African say Polly's done and Polly's took.
No, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that
Well, let
going
me
on.
tell you, those guys are going to get a snot clap from me, okay? Because we're not done with Polly. Polly's in this team. Sasha's the future. Marnie, I have renewed belief in, and Polly for the biggest games has got to be there. And let's face it. You always need insurance on the bench, and if the game needs to change, with Sasha and with Marnie, you have two very similar fly halves, in my opinion. Polly could always come on the bench and play differently. Okay, we needed to play differently. We needed to win in Cape Town,
You
and
know,
Polly did it. He led the team.
when I know that somebody has got, for lack of a better word, the it I'm talking about. When Damien Willemse was played out of position in the Stade de France in that 2022 game, and he still showed that he's got the it. You know what I mean? Not a fly half, but just played. Ches and
Yes,
Colby told to cover scrum half. You know,
yes.
you people disrespect Faf de Klerk a lot, but those are people that just have the that you want. And love Sasha. Look, nobody supports a person that looks like Sasha playing 10 for the Springboks like I'll ever do. All right. He's playing for people like me, people like you, people like everybody else. The point being, chime down South Africa. He
No,
is
no.
he the kid has played barely 20 tests. It took Apelele Fassi way more than that for him to get into his stride.
Sure.
It took Damien Willemse way more than that to, when I mean to get into his stride, to do it consistently against the big
No,
teams.
I agree, and that's got to come. But if we're not going to celebrate a boy who scored 37 points against Argentina to break the individual points record, I mean Monty got it against Namibia or something
No,
like
no,
that.
no.
This is phenomenal, and
No,
this
look at
is
the
not a
ratio
weak
of those points.
Argentinian team. If we
Look at the
can't get
ratio of those
excited and a
points.
little hyperbolic after that, Caleb, when can we?
I have a point for that. Look at the ratio of those points. He scored 37 when the team scored 60. There is a day, a certain boarding fly half from Pretoria called Monestein scored 31 points against the All Blacks on his own. And that was 100% of the Springboks points. Guys, fly halves that win you championships are your boring Derek Hawkins of this world, right? Like those are the Bush James cannot pass to save his life, but will tackle everything in his channel and will kick his
You're
corner.
being harsh on Bucci. He's got a few more distribution skills than that. But listen, I'm loving the discussion, but we're running out of time here.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell
Let's.
me before I ask you about the All Blacks. I mean, obviously we've got Argentina playing here in London. In my opinion, very simply, Caleb, I think I understand why Argentina have done it. The gate takings are going to be what 4 times as much here than they would get in Buenos Aires. So, I mean, you could sell a ticket for 60 euros in Argentina, you can sell it for about 150 euros. Yeah. So,
But also remember, all their players are playing in Europe.
no, no, agreed. So it's married to that, right? So I get why they're playing it here. To me, if you're a South African, you're going to be very happy because everyone behind the Boerewors belt and beyond in the southwest of London will be there cheering you on because they know that they're going to see potentially the Rugby Championship winners winning here. So for me, it plays into the Springboks' hands very, very nicely. What's your take?
Yeah, I think. Look, I think this is if there was people, Augustin Pichot and Rassi Erasmus, are good friends. I'm not sure how much influence Augustin Pichot still has in Argentina at the moment, but they are pioneers of what global world rugby should look like. Firstly, playing it in Argentina gives a signal to say we should start making this global game. South Africa saying, you know what, we're happy to go and play anywhere to make this work. South Africa played a home game at Twickenham before they played the World Cup versus France. Remember that game? Argentina and Filippo Contempomi saying, you know what, we'll go have a crack in London because they care more about Argentina. Haven't gone back to Argentina. Remember, they came from, I think,
Yeah, they
they came
spent
from
3 weeks
South
in
Africa.
South Africa, or 2 weeks, sorry.
Yeah, 2 weeks in South Africa. Then they flying back with the flying to London now with the Springboks. So all those players like Julian Montosha, Rodrigo Isgro, if he's all right, and those players that play in Europe are going to be at home, right? And I think that's brilliant. I think it's good for the global game, especially in the same stadium after the women play. You know, it's taking different type of fixtures to Twickenham. Outside of a World Cup, when will in the World Cup warm up, when will Twickenham ever see Argentina play South Africa? It's fantastic. But moving that needle, segueing into the All Blacks, the same thing I was saying about Handre Pollard, I think we'll touch on the Sharks in Durban about it. It's the same things that the All Blacks, I think, are struggling with. Yes, they got the Bledisloe back, but I can't tell you what this All Blacks team is trying to play like. The systems are not in place for like. Tell me, who are they identity wise? Like we know in South Africa, there's a bit of there's a Tony Ball game plan,
Mm,
and
mm.
there's a Rassi Erasmus, Jacques Naba, Felix Jones game plan with Dan Human saying um Scramjele tu, Haba tu. You know, we know there's that. I don't know what I don't know what's going on in New Zealand.
But is it not symptomatic of a team and a coach that's under pressure? And Razor just now needs to keep winning. And
Um,
and he hasn't figured out. And I think, Caleb, I was skeptical at the start of the season when you said, I think that his inexperience here and his inability to select the right combinations is hurting this team. And every week I watch them in the rugby championships, I feel like he doesn't really know what he's doing in terms of combos and what he wants to do. And is he trying to play that Crusader style with players who don't have the ability, or you know, teams that have worked out his pattern over the years? Um, I feel like this is a Razor problem linked in with the fact that they don't have the riches talent wise like they do in the past. But to me, Razor's not developed a game plan that's best for his combinations because he himself is not sure what that is. Like they know who Cam Roygaard is, and they sort of know who Will Jordan is.
yeah.
But after that, you
Look,
tell me.
if that All Black side is lacking Jody Barrett, Will Jordan, now you could add Cam Roygard and Adi Sevilla. Without those four, I'm not sure what they are. Like we saw Patrick Tupilotu come in and make a difference. Is
Mm,
Tupovai the guy? You know, like Damien McKenzie is going to play 10 this weekend for sure because Borden Barrett is
it's
injured,
injured.
right? And Jody Barrett, they don't even trust Damien McKenzie to be first receiver. Jody Barrett played a lot of that game at first receiver.
Mm,
It's I'm trying. I can't remember the psychological term when a team starts to become like their leader or a group of people starts with the P. Like there was this whole thing about Razor. I've said this before that he's the
Savior.
not savior but new age divergent break dancers. But you know what it is? He's actually a stack up prefect in a tie. Who's not sure where it's tense. He needs a Wayne Smith behind him. Like, forget all the break dancing. He's If you've seen him answering questions, you're right. He's not sure. There's too much tweaking and tweaking. So he's when I mean stuck up, I mean reserved. Maybe it's not the right word. Like he's in himself. So he goes back to the combinations that he knows from the Crusaders. It's getting tough. Bring Several Reese back in. It's getting tough. Select Lester Fanganuku. It's getting tough. Get the band back, boys. Like all we've heard in the last 18 months he's been in charge is trying to get Richie Moonga back.
Yeah,
You know,
and you know what I was going to say, Caleb, before we sort of I get your take on what you think will happen in Perth. I firmly believe, and the New Zealand nation is different to the South African rugby nation in the sense that when our team isn't achieving, we will call for a change in coach, and sometimes we're a bit quick to do that, and history has shown that. But what people need to realize is if New Zealand are going to make a change ahead of the next World Cup, it has to be after the Rugby Championship because you need to give that coach enough time to prepare the team for 2027. And I really believe that now is the time to maybe go, Razor didn't work out. He's a decent man, he's a decent coach, but this wasn't the right time for him. Joe Schmidt's time is coming to an end with the Wallabies. What can we do to get him here to do the job? He was Fozzie's assistant. He's shown what he's done with the Wallabies. He's made them more competitive, and he will be leaving them shortly. For me, I would be doing everything to bring Joe Schmidt back into my ecosystem. I'd be looking at relaxing the rules around selecting foreign players. I know they don't want to go whole hog just yet. And then they go into 2027 with somebody who has the experience, the rugby acumen, and the squad to win it.
I don't know if Tony Brown is the guy. Um, I I I I think the guy is Jonathan is what's his name?
Joseph, Jamie
What's his
Joseph.
first name? Jamie Joseph is the dude. I think you give him a go, and when he comes in, he might bring Tony back.
Of course,
Um,
they're a duo.
they're a duo. I think the challenge with New Zealand is they sort of believe that everybody needs to get a full World Cup cycle. You saw and I think the media in New Zealand is kind enough to give people a chance because they're not used to losing. There's a difference. When the media in England, the media in South Africa see that this is going wrong, the pitchforks come out very quickly because they've seen it and they know where it can get to.
Yeah, but but
They've
but,
been
but
there when Rudolph Strowley was in charge. Now they've got the Alistair Coetzee experience. That's why the pitchforks. It took to Coetzee 2 years. They didn't care about enough time for
sure,
Rassi and the team.
sure. But but
The
but but
English
Caleb, but
with Eddie.
but Caleb, I also think that sometimes you can be a good coach, but the timing isn't working and the players aren't reacting. It's just you're not that right fit at that right time. And South Africa has shown in 95 and in 2019, you only need 2 years to win a World Cup. This idea that you need a cycle that's longer is a little bit foolhardy. You don't. Kitch Christie wanted in similar fashion to Rassie Erasmus in 2 years. Yes, Jake had a 4 year cycle, but Jake, he justified his role in the position. The Boks were winning
He
under
was
him.
almost fired in 2006, by the way.
Yes,
You
but
know,
then we beat the All Blacks in Rustenburg when Andre
yeah,
Pistorius
the
kicked it.
players had also said they're
Yeah,
keeping Jake because they had a relationship with him from that under
yeah,
21 team.
yeah. And
Those
Andre
scouts.
Pistorius's kick went over, and there's a case to be even made that that was the right time for Heineke to come in. But let's put that aside for the second. I'm just saying, I think now is the time after the Rugby Championships to wish him well and then go and get somebody who could do the job. And my final parting shot is what Russie has done so well is that he's brought in an Irish influence. He's brought in a New Zealand influence. He's got our man from Jaguars. He's got our man Don Human on the farm, and that intellectual capital makes the team better. Not everybody in New Zealand needs to be involved with the New Zealand team. Have your New Zealand head coach, but diversify the rugby experience there. Because let's face it, in the words of John Kerwin, Super Rugby's dead.
Yeah. I think Super Rugby is dead. I don't know. I think they needed to put. I think it's the timing thing. He deserves his shot at the All Blacks, but I think the timing just didn't work for him. I don't know if revising the people playing outside helps them. I think it just means the French league will nick their youngsters quite quickly and quite early on, like it's happening in South Africa.
But there'll be better players for it. The New Zealand ecosystem's no longer what it once was.
Yeah, they used to be world leaders, and they're not. They're not innovating now, and that's just a weird thing. And it's systems, right? I don't think they've got the right systems in place, like another organization in Durban.
Well, before we
Um,
get to the Durban, give me your prediction for what's going to happen in Perth. Do you think the Wallabies bounce back?
no, I don't think they do.
No.
I think the Joe Schmidt falls into the Michael Checker um, group of coaches for me. There's an expiry date to the way they motivate players. Falls into the Eddie Jones, very good for quick turnaround. Ireland built it. I think he left a year too late. That's why they got hammered in that 2019 World Cup in the quarters by New Zealand, after having done wonderful things in Chicago and wonderful things in Dublin against the All Blacks. I think the Wallabies, yeah, I think that thing is done now. Not that they're going to lose a lot, but I think they now need a new. He's kind of knows he's not staying. There's a certain thing that happens when, yeah, dude, you're motivating us, but you're not staying. I'm not so sure if Les Kiss is also the right guy. But they'll also have an assistant coach. Their lineout was always good when Jeff Parling was there. I'm not sure how that's going to be without him. He's at Leicester now. So I think the All Blacks win it. I think South Africa get 5 points in London and they take the Rugby Championship. Yeah, I think that's I think South Africa it'll be closer. I think South Africa by 15, and New Zealand by 9.
Sure. Love the predictions. In my case, I think South Africa by 9. And I'm going to say the Wallabies by 6. So a little bit of difference there. Let's end, my friend, on the Rugby Championship. But just before we get there, I've got to do a little bit of not the Rugby Championship, the URC. I've got to do a little bit of a correction. The fly half for New Zealand in 1987 was Grant Fox, not Nick Fox. I'm not sure who Nick Fox was. But when we look at the URC, Caleb, the Stormers off to a wonderful start when they won. The Bulls are also winning. They're in the top 4 after the opening round. And then losses for the Lions and the Sharks. I mean,
What's common about those two teams that you've just lastly mentioned there before we talk about the Bulls and
they were on the road. One was in Cardiff and one was in Glasgow.
Yeah, but this is not new. The systems are bad at both those teams. The Sharks have been a shambles since 2021. Forget the Challenge Cup that they won because they had a bunch of Springboks that they front loaded. Forget them losing in a semi-final. They were never going to win that semi-final last season in the URC. Something is fundamentally wrong by that organization. You cannot have so many good players, even without their Springboks. They can field a pretty good team, and they always have two things consistent about the Sharks. They have a long injury list the whole time, like they seemingly can't keep their players healthy. And secondly, they play teams down to their horrible level. I'm not sure if the Plumtree thing is not working, but it wasn't working even before when they had Sean Everett. It wasn't working with Dupree as well before. There's something fundamentally wrong with that. I'm liking them more to Manchester United. Manchester United have been a shambles for 12 years since Fergie left. And they're painting the walls and there's still cockroaches inside the walls. The foundation is wrong. The bus is dead and they're changing the driver the whole time. Something is completely wrong with the Sharks. I'm not going to mince my words. You cannot have an organization with that amount of much money, that amount of Springbok IP in its dressing room, that amount of good coaches, Warren Whiteley, John Plumtree. They're not bad coaches. I think Joey Magalo is there and still played that horribly. I don't understand it. Like,
Yeah, look. Let me come in there, and I think it's important to mention, Caleb, that look how many players are out at the moment. I know you're saying they still have a strong team, but they're
they were
missing a
still
lot.
horrible with those
They're
players the season
missing a
before
lot of
last.
players, Caleb. And to
They
go
still
away to do it on a cold night in Glasgow isn't quite the easiest thing in the world when your frontline players are not there. I take your point about wider structures, and I know you're being reasoned when you talk about Plum and the coaching staff, because look, Plum won a European trophy, right? He's the first. They're the first South African team to win a European trophy, and they won that. But I take your point for the IP, for the investment in players. It does appear like something structurally is wrong. Now, do
it's
you
the,
think that's a Neil Powell thing, or do you think that's an ownership thing with Masotti, or is it just something that is bigger than one person or personality? This is a wide. There's a wider issue there.
it was horrible before those people. I'm not worried about how they lost. I'm not worried about the result. I'm worried about how they lost. Look at this team. These are no mugs. Edu van der Merwe, Lucanio Am, Francois Venter, Jaden Hendrickse. Sipio Matanzima was very strong at the Bulls. Fez Mbata, Ruan Drea is a Springbok, Malvin Ori, Pepsi Butelezi, Manu Chituka, and Vincent Chituka. Those are no mugs. Like, and you look at the Glasgow team with no British and Irish Lions, right? Like Stefford McDowell, Carl Rowe, Alex Samuel, Matt Ferguson, Roddy Dye, Jack Dempsey, maybe a good loose trio there. But the Sharks team was also no mugs. And they were horrible before Powell, right? They were horrible. They were horrible before Whiteley. They are horrible now. They last played good rugby. I'll tell you when they last played good rugby. That Super Rugby season that got cancelled because of COVID.
Well, yeah, though they were topping the table under Sean Everett and Lucanio, right? When they ended
Yes.
the tournament, that was a heartbreaker for me because that's the one I thought, yo, this is going to be the wonderful crowning moment after that World Cup. We're going to get a Super Rugby title in South Africa.
And I'm sorry, the Challenge Cup, they played one game to win it. They beat Clermont in the Stoop, and then they were always going to beat Gloucester.
Okay, so I'll give you a final thought on the Sharks. Like, do you have your finger on what you think is wrong there, or you're like, I'm not sure, but these are all the things swirling around?
They seem like Manchester United. The systems are bad.
Okay.
Like, if your best player is Lucanio Am, who's great but is clearly struggling for form, you know, I don't know. And what worries me is they've got a lot of Springbok youngsters, like who they are not treating well. Like you've got Jaden and Jordan Hendricks are Pepsi Butelezi, the Chituka brothers. There's a rumor starting that the Sharks is where Springbok careers go and die, with the exception of
No,
Oxen.
come on, look. And this is where I'll say I understand the
The
concern about
modern day Sharks, the
Bongi
modern
and
day
Kevin,
Sharks,
but Ox plays. Ox isn't. I mean, Ox is still the
with the
best.
exception of Ox, with the exception of Ox.
Sia? You think Sia's in bad form?
He hasn't played well for the Sharks. He's played brilliantly for the Boks.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is his career's not gone to die. I mean, he's been pretty injury prone as well. But Sia's been playing well. Hooker, you don't think Hooker's been doing well?
Yeah, they make seemingly individuals, but
Is-
collectively it never comes together. I think there's something wrong. And the difference with that is the Stormers. The issue with the
Mhm.
Stormers is they did not have a squad in the last two seasons. And I think they're slowly building a squad because the systems are right. The culture is correct. John Dobson does not need superstars to make them work.
Sure. And the other one I was going to say, Andre Esterhazen. I don't know. I think you're being a little harsh in
I
some
look
of
at the
the
profile of players. Look at the profile of players you're mentioning. The Sharks shouldn't be celebrating winning a Challenge Cup. Honestly,
No, but they but again, look, maybe this is my final point on it is like they obviously hadn't performed well in the URC. They put all their eggs in one basket, almost like
after
what
they made the
Postecoglou did
knockout,
with Tottenham, right? It's what Postecoglou did with Tottenham by winning the Europa League, and then they wanted to get back in. And I mean, look, that was 2 years ago, right?
yeah,
So I understand why they did what they did. Plum came in. Look, I think some of your points are valid, Caleb, and I value your wisdom on this,
yeah.
right?
I'm
But
just worried
but I'm
about.
not with you that Bok careers come to die in Durban.
At
I
the
think
current
there's
state.
enough examples that I've given you that
But
show you
those
boxing well.
players,
Systems, I'll agree with you. I'll agree with you on systems. I think
the
you
challenge
raise a valid point.
with the Bok players, Zayn, is most of them have gone to the Sharks with the exception of Ethan Hooker with a pedigree already. None of those Bok
Sure,
players have become
sure.
Boks by being at the Sharks.
Well, the Chitukas,
No, Chituka was on the radar when he was at the Lions and did not have a passport because of his whole citizenship saga. Who else? With the exception of Ethan Hooker, none of those players have become better players by being at the Sharks.
you don't
They
think
would.
Chituka's become a better player? You don't think?
He
Well,
was always at that level. He was always at that level. He's just continued to be at that
Williams,
level. Who?
Grant Williams.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
I think Grant was always good. I wouldn't say the Sharks have improved Grant Williams. I think the Springboks have. You
interesting.
know,
All
like
right.
I don't know. I think Felix Jones, Jacques Ninaba, Rassi Erasmus have improved. Mzwandile Stick have improved Grant Williams. I'm not sure what you can tell me about players that have gone there. M- They almost killed Money. Like, let's face it, they almost killed Money. He was built up at the Stormers. I'm worried about the Hendricksa brothers, high ceiling, but I'm not so sure what they're getting by being there a lot. Like,
All right, all right. I tell you what, for those of you listening out there, I've not done one social media plug. As you can see, Caleb and I have a difference of opinion on this one. What do you think? OTW score underscore podcast on X, on TikTok, on Instagram. And of course, search for the On the Whistle podcast on Facebook and YouTube. Let us know what you think. Let us know how you think the rugby championships are going to end. Let us know what you think about New Zealand and whether Razor should continue coaching. Let us know what you think about the women's game and how that has gone to a new level during the Rugby World Cup that we've seen. And of course, the Sharks debate is going to rumble on because the Rugby Championship will end and the URC will come into focus. Caleb, I always love chopping it up with you. It looks like you want to say one more thing before I say goodbye. So let me give the mic to you because in case I cut you off from your killer blow.
whatever is wrong with the Sharks is everything that's right with the Stormers. John Dobson has done twice as much with half the budget that the Sharks have had. And he's made people. Ben Jason Dixon, Manili Bok, career was dead until he went there. Siabelo Sinatla was resuscitated. People started to talk about Rowan Nell as a potential Bok. Remember 2 seasons ago? And he was in and around the squad. Who have I mentioned? Damien Willemse has been phenomenal playing for them. They've brought up Sacha Feinberg-Mngomezulu. He played in the URC final, remember, at 12?
Mm-hmm.
And he was in tears when he won that league. Damien Willemse on one hand. They tried to another player who I think is just him. They tried to help Joseph Dweba, but surely only God can. So that's why he's gone to Exeter Chiefs and trying to do it in the heart of Devon. They've done things, and that coaching team does not have superstar names. It's John Dobson. Is it Dowie Snyman there? It's just a couple of 4 of them, and they've had financial issues and have brought players up to Springbok standard. I think they need to get more props. Netling Fouchier, who knew about Netling Fouchier being a good player? Andre Hugo Fenta. So yeah, put some respect on Dobson. Whatever the Sharks are not doing right, he's doing right. That's my parting gift.
There we go. And we will get into it as the Rugby Championships ends and there's more URC. Caleb, always appreciate your analysis and searing views. And for those of you listening to Rugby Afrique, get posting, leave a rating, leave a review, help people find the show. Caleb, we'll do this again soon. We got a Boks game to look forward to. We'll wait for the team to be announced and then we'll preview the big one. But for now, we wish you all the best.